Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DataBank's CISO Corner. I'm Dane Dittamore with DataBank, and our subject matter expert, as always, is DataBank's Chief Information Security Officer, Mark Haupt. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Dane, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Hey, today's topic is Know Your Risk Tolerance, Establishing Your Data Security Investment. Now, of course, my first thought is to compare this to how a person or a family might approach its own investment strategy, right? But before you can decide on which financial instruments to use, you need to know what you're talking about and what you're willing to risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a reasonable comparison, probably a lot more in depth, especially for a business information security environment. But I'm sure we're gonna dive a little deeper here and talk about a lot of those different factors as we go through today's episode.
Yeah, so let's compare that to an enterprise's IT investment and the IT department.
Okay.
Where should the IT leader begin? Should they first be thinking about the data risk or be thinking about what the business wants to accomplish?
Well, I'm going to tell you first, and this is not popular among CISOs, but I'm going to tell you always think about what the business wants to accomplish first. So inside of security, there's what we call the CIA triad, and it has nothing to do with the three-letter acronym for a super secret spooky spy machine that lives in someplace in Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. What that means is it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And lots of times, security professionals really weigh heavily on that the confidentiality and the integrity piece, and they forget about the availability aspect, which is where the business has to maneuver in order to accomplish their goals. So, if the business isn't maneuvering to accomplish their goals, the business isn't making money, and there's no money to pay the CISO and the other security professionals. Well, this CIA triad type of thing, we look at it as a three-legged stool. So if you think of a three-legged bar stool or something like that, if you were to cut one of those legs off or make it shorter, that bar stool will lean in one particular direction and it won't be effective anymore as a bar stool. So in order for us to consider everything and risk, before we can consider data risk, we need to understand what the business is trying to accomplish, how they're going to make money with that, and then we can apply our security controls and our security mindset to that to accomplish the confidentiality and the integrity within regulation and compliance, and also to the best way that we possibly can to reduce the risk, to mitigate the risks that the business needs to operate within in order to accomplish their tasks. Does that make sense?
It sure does. It sure does. But I assume that the risk tolerance differs by application. Is that right? I mean, surely every application can't have the same level of protection. What are some examples of when an enterprise might have a higher tolerance for risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are absolutely correct that every application, and I would even expand it to beyond the application, I would expand it to every function, every action. Because remember, security is not just about cybersecurity. Security is the whole. I mean, even physical security of the building, even personal protection. Sometimes, depending on your business, for your executives as they travel around the country or internationally, they may need, and for lack of a better term, a bodyguard, or at least some sort of intelligence about who might be trying to influence them or otherwise. But let's focus on the application pieces and really kind of dig into that a little bit. And yes, every single one of them has a different risk tolerance and a different need for security application. And that's where the CIA triad that I talked about goes into play. So what you need to do is you need to conduct a business risk tolerance type of scenario. You need to do a risk analysis on that application. And you need to determine, first of all, what kind of data is inside of that application. Is it regulated data like medical data, HIPAA, for example, or even in the education environment, FERPA data? Are you doing credit card transactions, which would be governed by PCI DSS? And if your answer is actually no to all of those, and really what you're trying to protect is just simply the nuts and bolts or the proprietary information of how your organization operates, and it's not regulated data, it's just confidential business data, then you may actually put less security controls on that. And then there are certain situations where we put too many security controls on it because we're just doing check boxes. And really, we want that information to be public and out there and available to a person without any restrictions. So, let's look at a couple of examples. For if you're a library, you want everybody within your constituency, perhaps even beyond your constituency, to see what your collection looks like and see what kind of books you have in your library. So you're going to make all that data as easily accessible to the public as you possibly can. But on the flip side of that, if you're a university library, for example, instead of a public library, you may have research documents, or you may have contracted obligations with research documents or academic types of documents or other institutions that require you to put that service behind a password protected or some sort of a paywall type of situation where only an authorized student can gain access to it. So you see, that's a perfect example of where in one case, something could be wide open and available. In a very similar case on a different type of application, it requires some sort of lockdown and some sort of security controls to be put into place.
Yeah, I get it, and I'm sure our audience gets that too. So in the title of the podcast, we included the word investment. Now, typically, we expect some kind of return on an investment. What kind of return should an IT leader expect from their posture?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's one that CISOs deal with all the time, because in the security world, we are typically providing insurance. And when you go and buy insurance for your car, you are buying a policy. Let's say you're spending $300 every 6 months for a policy on your car in the event that something happens. In the event that you get into an accident. But if you never get into an accident, then what is the return on your investment? And you have to constantly be thinking about that. It's the same thing with security. If we're applying $1 million or even $2 or $3 million, which is probably more common even in a mid-sized business, in order to protect data within a security environment, you're buying this security tool and you're buying that security tool and you're having security staff and even cyber insurance. You have all those things in place. How do you measure what that investment looks like if you never have an attack on your environment? And here's how you do that. You conduct a business impact analysis, first of all, which is what we were talking about a minute ago, about determining the value of your data. And then you do a risk analysis to identify what would happen, what would be the cost to the business if you were down. So one of the examples I give at DataBank is, if you have a DDoS attack against an application that is processing credit cards, how much are you going to lose by that application? How much actual revenue are you going to lose by that application not being able to process the credit cards? Let's say you're down 2.5 hours and it's $1 million an hour that you are not able to process. Well, all of a sudden you're looking at $2.5 million of lost revenue during that time of just real live transactions. That doesn't account for all the IT people that are involved in trying to recover from that situation and so on and so forth. So you have to dream up these situations and their potential frequency. And there's actually formulas on different kinds of formulas, but formulas on how to analyze risk in that manner. So, I use that DDoS model that I just talked about to encourage people to encourage customers to buy our DDoS tools. And that's not why I'm talking about this, but to buy our DDoS tools prior to having an attack against your system instead of after you have an attack against your system. Because if you do that risk analysis and you say, hey, it's going to cost me $2.5 million, and I expect I'm going to have a DDoS attack on an annual basis. So my savings, if I have a DDoS protection tool, is the 2.5 minus the cost of the DDoS protection tool, which might cost you, say, $50,000 a year. So you're looking at $2.45 million worth of savings from an attack. That's how you do, I know it's a lot of math, it's a lot of talking, but that's how you do risk analysis. And that's how you define the investment of your security tools inside of the environment. If you have a CISO that's not doing that or doesn't know how to do that, then give us a call and we can help train them on how to do it. Because once you get a formula going, it's not hard to figure out.
Yeah, sounds like a kind of a classic opportunity cost sort of
Right.
analysis, right? So
Exactly.
it also sounds like this could be a special initiative for an IT leader, but ideally it would just be common practice in how they do their business. But should there be some kind of output for all of this research in the same way a financial advisor prepares an investment strategy so they can guide the business?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a set of things that I have in my life. I call them the non-negotiables. Others may call them, baselines, or these are the minimum things that I need to know, or that we're going to need to know and do on an annual basis in order to maintain our environment. And so doing a business impact analysis anytime a new system goes into place, and at least annually, if not, yeah, you might, depending on the original business impact analysis, you may be okay doing it once every 2 years, but certainly once every 1 to 2 years, conducting a risk analysis with your business impact analysis on the application is kind of a non-negotiable. It's a very baseline thing that a IT leader, CIO, CTO, CISO should be doing against their organization annually. So one of the things, we do at DataBank, we do third-party vendor risk assessments. So we evaluate our vendors and how they might have an impact upon us. We do annual audits. In some ways, those are risk assessments because they show gaps or not gaps, in our case, inside of our security controls and the tools and such that we use. So there's multiple types of things, but it should be one of those non-negotiables in your IT department that your L1, your leadership, your top level leadership gets a report annually that says, at least annually, that says this is what is going on from a risk perspective. At DataBank, we actually report that on a monthly basis to our L1s in a monthly conversation we call capacity planning, where each one of the different teams reports on what's going on inside their organization, what the ticket volume looks like. And from a security perspective, we're talking about what are our top risks that we're looking at for that month, what's going on out there that our leadership needs to be aware of, and how that's impacting the business.
Well, Mark, you always have such a well-informed perspective, and thank you. Well, so for those of you who are listening and would like to be notified when the next CISO Corner podcast is released, or have a topic that you'd like Mark and I to address, just drop us an email at CISO@databank.com. And of course, that's CISO@databank.com. And as always, be safe and stay secure.